Bolts Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Bolts Block Party. I guess this is kind of going to be our season finale. We do have a bonus episode that will drop in the following week, which we could probably let them know at the end of today's show. But welcome back. I guess this is our 2023 season wrap-up. Wolfie and Kobe. We obviously had to bring in the top dog to talk about our season and delve into some of his things in his past and how he got to this point. Bolts Nation, please welcome our general manager, Mr. Julien BriseBois. Julien, thank you so much for being here and taking your time out of your very busy schedule. We know this time of year is crazy, and you've got a lot going on. So thank you for taking the time with us.
My pleasure. I think it's going to be fun.
So on behalf of the fans, let me be the first to thank you, because the last 10 years of Tampa Bay Lightning hockey have been by far the most exciting and the most successful that we've been able to be a part of. You know, going 9 playoffs in 10 years, 6 conference finals, 4 conference titles, 4 cup finals, 2 back-to-back cups. You obviously a major part of that. So on behalf of the entire fan base, I would like to say thank you, because this last 10 years of hockey has been nothing but exceptional.
Well, I will accept your thanks, but I will do so on behalf of our entire organization. Like, it really does take a village. First and foremost, it's players like Kobe that do it on the ice, and they're the ones who make us look good at the end of the day.
Sure.
But even from a management standpoint and a coaching standpoint, like, it's Coop, but it's all the assistant coaches we've had. It's the development program we have. It's our coaches in the minor leagues with the Syracuse Crunch. It's our scouts out in the field who are finding players for us. Both at the amateur level for the draft and at the pro level in terms of trades and free agent signings. So I think it's apropos to use the expression, it takes a village. It really is a big collective effort, which is why it's so cool when we're fortunate enough to win the cup, is we get to share it together. It's a collective accomplishment that we all get to share in. And that's why we will keep grinding to do it again.
Go ahead, Kobe.
Yeah, well, I think, sometimes leaders, like yourself, I think you have to kind of relish in the success you've had, because there's going to be other times, and leaders, they also have to accept the responsibility when things go sideways. So I think you've done a great job of that, of kind of living out the process, and that testament is really kind of a strength to your leadership and many others along the way.
It's funny because I heard the list of our group's success the past decade or so, and it's awesome. Like, it was, and all of those were great, but all it does is fuel the fire to do it again. Yeah. You were talking about the past decade. I'm looking forward to setting up the next decade.
Love to hear that. So looking at how things have transpired this season already, when you look at the Boston Bruins, who had, obviously we thought we set the bar, and they took the bar even past what we had set. They have a season like that, they're out in the first round. You've got Seattle, who wins their first playoff series ever against the defending Stanley Cup champs. Has never happened. You've got now New York Rangers, who people thought this was their time. They're out. When you look at those situations this season, does that speak volumes to how really difficult it is to compete for the cup each year, but really showcases how amazing of an accomplishment it has been for us to do that 3 times in a row, to make it to the conference final 3 times in a row?
It is, and I was aware of that as we were going through it. I didn't take it for granted.
Sure.
And internally in some of our communications with our business people and our salespeople, even our hockey ops department, I frequently mentioned to them, or tried to remind them, hey, let's not take this for granted. We are on a heck of a run. It's so hard to win one, and it's incredibly hard just to get to the finals. It's become a challenge just to make the playoffs. Right. You look at the teams that miss the playoffs, and a bad week here, a bad week there might explain why they're not in. And if they're in, maybe they're winning in the first round, and now they're pursuing a cup or a long playoff run. So we can't take any of our success for granted. We can't take for granted that we will continue to be successful. We need to put in the work. We need to make the sacrifices, continue to make the sacrifices, continue to put the team first.
Sure.
And if we do that, hopefully we get rewarded with success.
Talk to us about the process, right? And for us casual fans, we don't understand at this time of year like things that are getting ready to happen, right? You have free agencies, you've got guys that are restricted, guys that are unrestricted, you have the draft coming up, and like you mentioned, you've got scouts, you've got the minors. How does the process work when you're at this time of the year, for you especially, where all of these things are combining at once? You obviously know heading into this coming season, the needs you want to address, you're going to have to move the puzzle pieces around, so to speak. But what is the process in developing from literally the ground level of your scouts? Like we just saw this week, you found players like Maxim Groshev, which I would love for you to talk about this guy. I see Sergey posting with pictures with him. It's amazing. So what is that process like? Because it seems so in depth, from finding it at the grassroots level and bringing them up through the system to the crunch and getting them to this level. Can you talk about the different elements that you're about to go through in this process now with the draft and with free agency and things of that nature?
Well, if we go about how we find players,
Yes.
Again, we have outside of the players, we have over 60 employees in hockey ops. Like it's a big undertaking. It's a big operation, and everyone kind of has their own responsibilities, and we all work collectively. If I were to divide it up, and that's kind of how my assistant GMs are set up, I have Al Murray, who runs our amateur scouting department, and he runs the draft.
Okay.
And then I have Jamie Pusher. He is director of player personnel, assistant GM, director of player personnel, and he looks out for any professional players that we can trade for, players that become free agents, players that could go on waivers. So his team makes sure that we have a good book on all of those people.
Gotcha.
And then we have Stacy Roos. He's assistant GM, director of player development. He oversees our Syracuse Crunch program, but all of our skating coaches, skills coaches, mental performance coaches, our JP Cote is director of player development as well. He goes out on the road. He reports to Stacy. Goes out on the road and visits with all of our prospects, whether they're in Europe, whether they're in college, whether they're in the CHL, and stays on top of their needs. And then I have Matthew Darsh, who's assistant GM, director of hockey operations. So he's the one who works closest with me with the big club here. He oversees our analytics department, reports to him, budgets, scheduling, player contracts, and he's kind of a sounding board for myself and the three other assistant GMs in all the things that we work on. So, and then, from then it kind of filters to different scouts. We have 2 in Russia, we have 1 in Finland, 1 in Sweden, 1 in the Czech Republic, and then all across Canada and all across the US. So it is a big undertaking. A lot of people work together, and I think that's part of the reason we've been successful finding players and developing players is we work together and we share in the success. And the amateur scouts will find a player, they'll hand him over to our player development program. Player development program hopefully helps them reach their potential. Hopefully that potential is becoming an NHL player that can help the Lightning win games.
Sure.
That player comes over here, and then we hand him over to Coop, and he takes it from there. So we all work together to produce players and find players.
So from a drafting standpoint, I know I heard a story when you were looking at players to trade. You traded for Barclay Goodrow. You watched his last 20 games. So you're in the draft and you have a player. How many times have you personally watched that player on tape?
If you are talking draft or like free agents.
So I'm switching to the draft here.
Okay,
so
sure.
a junior level player, a college level player, or a kid in Europe.
Most of them, and I think I'm not unlike most GMs, most of those players I will never have seen.
Never have
really.
Seen. So you rely on your
Yeah, Al Murray runs the department. He sets it up. He and his team produce a list.
Yeah.
And the way I've worked with Al is I've told him I don't want to see the list because I don't want to influence it.
Right.
Because I don't see those players often enough.
Okay.
And I've stayed away from, ever since, I've stayed away from the process until we have a final list a week to the draft.
Right.
And then I get involved. And
so
then it's more the process. It's
Right.
okay, why are these players in this order?
Do you interview the players? Like
I usually go to the combine.
Yeah.
Haven't been able to go the last few years, fortunately, because we're still playing.
Right.
And I will interview the players that are available at the combine. And then we usually, the week of the draft, will have other players come in as well and interview them. So yes, I will usually interview them. But the impact of that interview on our draft list is minimal.
Right. So Wolfie, I got a story.
I
got a story. I was when I was going through the process in 2003, I think my draft year.
Sure.
Same thing. Go to the combine. We're sitting down, and you do this fitness testing. So they put you in these
Put the things on.
Yeah, but you do all the, and then it's a big thing where you're in. All the teams have hotel rooms, and they have kind of like a little a boardroom type of thing, and you kind of make your way through meeting with different teams. So the one team, and I won't say who, but I went into the room, and as soon as I walked in, a big boardroom, and there's like 5 or 6 scouts and guys in there, and you're in the suit, and you're all kind of nervous, and your hands are sweaty, and right on the middle of the table is a big box of pizza. Okay. And then there's a couple beers in the middle of the table. And they're like, hey, Braydon, long day. How are you doing? And they're like, you must be so hungry. Or you want a beer or you want some pizza? The whole time I'm just thinking, this is a test. This is a test. I would love one of those. This would be amazing. But do you guys ever do stuff like that? Or have you heard stories of that happening?
I've heard different stories over the years. I don't know how many of them are urban legends and how many of them are accurate. We try to be pretty straightforward. Sure. Tricking an 18-year-old at an NHL interview, like, what is that going to tell us with regards to that player's potential down the road? So we try to be straightforward, professional. We try to actually provide a good image of our organization to these players, because maybe we won't be able to draft them. Most of them, we won't be able to draft them. But in a few years, they're going to be free agents. And maybe they'll have a good opinion of our organization. It'll make it easier for us to attract them to our group.
Yep, it's true. Every time I think about that team, I think beer and pizza. Yeah.
There you go.
Stuck with you. So how does one, Julien, make the transition from working in a law firm, representing sports law for MLB, arbitration, the NHL, to becoming a general manager of an NHL franchise? How do you go from that law mentality, studying law, to knowing what it takes to run a franchise and everything that comes along with that?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight.
Well, I was going to say,
So I started working for the Canadians. I was loaned out from my law firm, I think in 2000, for 6 months to the Canadians, and I worked for the Canadians for 6 months. And after that, I got hired full time in the fall of 2001 or summer of 2001. And I got a GM job in 2018. So there's 18 years of essentially being an assistant GM and working in hockey ops and kind of growing my role and adding responsibilities over time.
Sure.
I think I was very fortunate. I worked for awesome general managers who all treated me great and gave me opportunities to grow. First and foremost, I think that was it. And I will always be grateful for them, starting with Andre Savard, who gave me my first job. And then Bob Gainey, who gave me a lot more responsibility over time and eventually had me run the farm team. That was a great value, experience in terms of getting me ready to be an NHL GM. When you're running the AHL team, you are a GM. You're facing the same issues, just less scrutiny. Right. So if you screw up, less people notice. But it was a great, you're working with coaches, you're working with staff, you're working with players, you're working with agents. It's the same job, just at a different level. And even the other people I worked with, scouts and coaches, players, I asked a lot of questions, and everyone was so generous with me in sharing their experiences and sharing their thoughts, and I learned from the people that were around me. And over time, I got to a point where someone felt like I could do this job and offered it to me.
I'd like to go a step further.
Sure.
Because I know you were growing up, you were a very competitive baseball player. And so I was talking to Wolfie about this. I was like, why hockey? Like, why hockey and not baseball? Right. Because your background probably could have taken you any different ways.
Yeah, it was serendipitous because I never planned on working in sports. I went to law school. In law school, I figured I'd be a tax lawyer. I started a master's in taxation law.
That doesn't sound fun.
It actually, you're right. That lasted a week. It wasn't for me. Let's put it that way. But as I was interviewing for articling positions at these different law firms, when I interviewed at one particular firm, I had written an article when I was a law student, and it is the driest article ever. It's on the legal relationship between a professional athlete and his agent under Quebec law. It's
okay.
Yeah, if you want to go to sleep at night. But it got published, it won awards. So I'm selling myself in my interview at the law firm, and the lawyer who's interviewing says, oh, that's interesting. We have a partner here who has contacts in the NHL, and he wants to start a sports law department. He's looking for someone who's bilingual, which is not an issue here, but was an issue in Montreal and Quebec, who knows sports. and you'll get to meet him in the second interview. So I left knowing I was getting a second interview, which is a good feeling.
Great, right.
And eventually I got the job thinking I would do tax law and do a little bit of sports on the side. But by the time I left the firm, I was doing nothing but sports law. We were very fortunate. I got there at the right time, and we were cold calling NHL GMs and getting business, and they were giving us business. So today I don't think that would happen, but I was at the right place at the right time. Did that for a little under 3 years, and then with articling and all that, a little under 3 years. And then it was at a time where NHL teams were looking for lawyers to work in hockey operations. And
the game was changing.
And half the NHL teams already had a lawyer and the other half didn't. And Montreal didn't have one, but they were a client of ours. I had worked with them. I'd worked with their president and their GM. And when an opening was available, they offered me the job.
So you mentioned Andre Savard hired you for the Canadiens, and you worked under Bob Gainey, Eiserman.
Right.
What do you think these guys saw in you?
You would have to ask them. Because at first, when I got the job in Montreal, my ability to contribute was very limited. I had an expertise in salary arbitration and valuing players objectively based on their stats, what they could get on the open market and what they could get in salary arbitration. That was it. And that's what I did at first. But I was around, and again, can't thank Andre Savard enough, but he had me attend all the pro meetings, all the amateur meetings. We went scouting. We went to the Western League, NCAA, USHL, the Quebec League. We scouted the AHL. We scouted the NHL. He just brought me everywhere, and everyone was so generous in the organization and sharing their experiences and helping me grow. Like I just literally was at the right place at the right time. And over time, I was given a little more responsibility and handled it well enough that I was given a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And here we are today.
Right. Snowball effect.
Yeah. So, I mean, normally that's how it happens. Yeah. Like you said, you've worked with some greats. Is there any specific piece of advice that any one of those individuals has given you over the years that really has stuck?
I'm not good at that. I'm sure a lot has been transferred to me via osmosis.
Sure.
I do remember one press conference where one of the GMs I worked for, it was going to be a challenging press conference just because of the situation around the team and the topic of the press conference. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching him deliver the press conference, and he was so good. Like, he delivered a phenomenal performance. And I remember telling him that I was watching from the back, and then we were walking back to our offices, and I told him, like, that was a tough press conference. You handled that great.
Right.
And he said, never let them see you sweat. Yeah. And that might have stuck with me as well. Yeah.
Sure.
So you are in Montreal. Steve Eiserman comes calling. What did you know about Tampa and the Lightning before you got here?
I started working in the NHL as an outside counsel in '99. So I saw Tampa become the team that won the Cup in 2004. Right, I saw the Vinny LeCavaliers, the Brad Richards, the Marty St. Louis coming, Happy Boulin, and actually the Lightning were a client of mine when Jay Feaster was the GM, and even before that, Rick Dudley was the GM. They were one of the teams that we worked with at the time. So I had a little bit of familiarity with them, and I saw their success. And then I also saw when the work stoppage canceled the 2004-2005 season, there's a handful of teams that really got crushed by that, and Tampa was one of them.
Yep.
It really put a stop to their progression and did not allow them to have as long of a string of success they probably should have had based on how the team had been built. And then prior to my joining the team, they had some really rough years. That's how you end up getting Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman. Right. You have to go through some pain.
Right. Sure.
And so I knew both sides. But Steve could confirm this. When I got the job here, we were I don't remember where we were, but it was Todd Leiweke, who was our CEO at the time, mm-hmm. Steve and I told him Tampa has the potential to be the best hockey market in the league. And I believed it because the quality of life was phenomenal, the low state taxes, the low costs, the great sunshine. It's on the East Coast. We know we have fans here. We just need to bring them back into the building. Now we have great ownership. Players are going to want to play here. Their wives are going to want to stay here. we have what it takes. Now we just need to go out and execute and hopefully get some breaks along the way. And we were fortunate enough to, I think, do a really good job with our group and get some breaks along the way.
So, from the fans' perspective, when Steve Eiserman was brought in, again, I think the credibility to the organization was restored immediately just by adding the name Steve Eiserman. But you working alongside with him all of those years, but then he leaves, and the catapult of our success goes from there. So a lot of, I think, of our fans the whole time we're thinking, obviously Steve was the face of the organization, so to speak, but maybe Julien this whole time has been the mastermind behind the scenes making things work, because at the end of the day, that's when the success really took off for the team. So for fans that would think that, what do you say to them, obviously with that relationship with you and Steve Eiserman?
I would say when I inherited the GM position here, it was set up for me to be successful. Steve had done a phenomenal job setting us up for success, and I inherited the team at a time where we were about to have a record-breaking regular season. We had all these star players, and then it was just curating that talent and surrounding it and trying to make the most with our good fortune. A lot went into us being able to have all these great players all at once. A lot of hard work, a lot of good work, but also some luck.
Sure.
So when you have all that, you have to make decisions and be aggressive in trying to capitalize on your good fortune. So that was my job. That continues to be my job.
And so with that being said, we know, again, at this time of year, difficult decisions have to be made, right? Fans have attachments to their favorite players. We all do, right? For not only what they do on the ice, but for how they impact the community, things that they do outside of the walls here at Amalie Arena. So when you're faced with those challenges now, and we know, the different players that are in a different situation with our team, what really goes into those thoughts and decisions? Obviously, we know it's a business at the end of the day, right? Financial, you have to run the business, and you're handicapped by the cap of the NHL and salary, and we get all of that. But help us understand from your perspective what really goes into those decisions when you have a handful of players that you would love to keep here, but you just know we physically cannot bring everybody back. What goes through your mind, and take us through that process of how that goes?
It's actually a pretty easy question to answer, but before I do that, I will say I'm well aware, I've been very fortunate. Like I said, I inherited a great job. It was set up for us to be successful. With all these great players, and because of the work of all these people, these coaches, but mostly these players, my name's on the Stanley Cup twice. And that being a reality has a lot more to do with Ryan McDonough, Andre Palat, Yanni Gourde, Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman, Tyler Johnson, just to name a few, and there are many others that are still on our team, than it has to do with anything I did. And I'm well aware of that. And I am grateful to all those players for what they've done for me. So it is hard when some of those players leave. But to answer your question, what drives the decision? It's the future. Okay. How do we make sure we continue to be successful going forward? Sure. That's it. At the end of the day, it's putting ourselves in the best position possible so that we can sustain our level of success, so that year in, year out, we're a Stanley Cup contender, legitimate Stanley Cup contender, so that if on a given year the stars align for us, we can go on a long playoff run and hopefully bring the cup back. So that drives every decision.
So let's talk quickly about this past season, and we don't have to dwell on anything negative. I just want to talk about the things you really liked this season, and not so much about the milestones of Stammer and, obviously Pointer now with the Lady Byng nomination and the 50-plus goals, and Hagel had an amazing season, but talk more about the Eisermans, Tanner Jeannot, and the fact that he was right there and he gets injured, and, even Darren Radish in the play. So talk about the things you liked from this season, not on the grand scheme of the things that we already know were the great accomplishments.
Well, there's a lot that I liked about the season. Obviously, my job is to look after the collective success of our group. Yep. But at the same time, I cheer for our players, and I cheer for them to be successful individually. So I am cheering for Braydon Point to get his 50 goals. I am cheering for Stammer to get over a point a game,
Sure.
or name the accomplishment.
off with his assists.
His
right?
100 points,
right.
Killorn 30 goals, Hagel 30 goals, or whatever they may be. There was a stretch of time when I was looking at our team and I was trying to set it up to be successful come playoff time, and we did the Tanner Jeannot trade. The vision I had in place, I got to see it for 4 games. In late March, we played Boston, Carolina, Washington, and the Islanders, I think. And we played lights out. We were physical. We were hard to play against. We were unpleasant to play against. We didn't give up much, and we had swagger. Yep. That's the team I was hoping we would be able to carry into the playoffs, and Tanner was a big part of that. He got almost 5 hits a game, finally got his first goal, looked like he was getting more comfortable. After, it's a big adjustment coming to a new team. I think people underestimate how big an adjustment it is. And we see it time and time again, players coming in here after the trade deadline. We're fortunate they get off the ice, it's seamless, pretty much. Like, we have a great locker room. We usually bring in guys that we've vetted the personality. We have every reason to believe they're going to fit into our locker room, and they have. On the ice, it's an adjustment. Because with familiarity comes anticipation, and with anticipation comes quickness, and you can play fast without thinking. When you don't have those shared experiences with those players on the ice, you can't play as fast. And now you're slow, and if you're slower, then you're that half second you've lost.
The margin in the air in the league is so small that if you don't have the comfort of just being able to act without thinking,
exactly,
you're already a step behind. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
So we go through the deadline, and now it's how are the Lions going to set up? How are the D pairs going to set up? And I think at that going into that Boston game, we finally found the right pairs, the right line combinations, and the swagger. Yeah. Right. And then unfortunately Tanner got hurt, and he was a big part of that swagger. And then we only got it back come playoff time.
Sure.
And then, we saw what happened there. I think we battled hard. We played well. We generated a lot of chances. We limited the chances against. We just, at the end of the day, didn't do enough to capitalize on our chances. And Toronto did a phenomenal job making the most of theirs. Right. And that's why they deserve to move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can speak for most fans, like where we felt we outplayed them for most of that series, but sometimes, as they say, the puck just didn't bounce our way, as they say. And that
happens. That's hockey.
That is hockey. So now that the season's over and injuries and things are made public, can you explain to us why the NHL is the only real league that does not disclose injuries during the regular season? In the NFL, somebody has a sprained ankle, cracked rib, they tell you what. Baseball, same thing. It just seems that in basketball, same thing. Why? Is it simply because you don't want to give your opponent
that simple?
That's really that. That's all
and it my experience is that initially came from the players who thought they needed to be protected.
Sure.
And I fully support that. At the end of the day, does it really matter to the fan whether you're out because you have a broken wrist or a separated shoulder? No, what matters is if you're playing or not.
Right. Yeah.
But to the opponent, knowing what to target, if the player is playing with an injury or coming back from an injury, I think, especially come playoff time, the stakes are so high, you're looking for an edge anywhere you can.
Yeah.
I think that component in other sports is a big part to do with gambling.
For sure.
And I don't think hockey, just for whatever reason, I think it's a protection thing. Like if I had broken ribs, I might still be able to play.
But I'm going to go after you, and you're that side.
You might say, every player say, I wouldn't do that. But in the end of the day, when there's a scrum or a pile or something, that stick's probably going to find your way to your ribs somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you a big pickleball guy?
You're asking the question because you know the answer.
I know we were chit-chatting about it, but it's become such a massive sport that people love to play. And so what is it about pickleball that you enjoy?
In Montreal, I played squash.
Okay.
And played squash on a fairly regular basis. Actually, speaking of people that I worked with, our goalie coach in Montreal for the longest time was Rolly Melanson. He's the one who initiated me to squash, and we would play on the road. And eventually I started playing everywhere. And when I came here, there really wasn't squash. It's more racquetball here in Tampa. So I decided to take advantage of the nice weather and convert it to tennis. So I did tennis for a while. And then when we went into the bubble, actually, I think my first GM meeting, Jarmo Kekalainen, who's the GM in Columbus, he was also a big tennis player, still is, but he converted to pickleball. And he said, Julian, we should go play pickleball. And that's how it started. And then when we were going into the bubble in Toronto and we would have a lot of downtime, he and I lobbied the league to set up pickleball courts
Nice.
within the bubble so that we would have some time to play and kill time.
Sure.
And our passion really took off from there. We played a lot while we were in Toronto, and then when we were fortunate enough to move on to the conference finals and move on to Edmonton, the league was gracious enough to set up courts for us there, and we just kept playing, and we never stopped playing.
So the rivalry with GMs, though, it extends past Yarmo, right? Like there's a couple GMs
now. There's
that
more coming into
right.
there's more players, more GMs have started playing with us. Some have courts in their backyards, and they're trying to raise their game. So it's fun. I don't golf. A lot of the GMs golf, and
Right,
that's how they socialize. And there's a group of us that play tennis and play pickleball.
So if we made a little ranking, like where on the ranking scale are you?
I think Yarmo is one.
Yarmo's one. Okay.
Yarmo's one. I think today I am probably two.
Okay.
Right
It's
on.
like Fight Club, though. You don't talk about it. You
No,
don't
no,
talk about GM
you
Pickleball
want to
Club,
be
dude.
two. You want to be two. You don't want, you know.
No, I'd like to be one. I'd like to be one, Colby.
Yeah,
I'd like to be. I'm still
It's gonna
angling
keep
for
you
that
hungry.
number one.
It's going to keep you hungry. I know it because you're not hungry enough.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I'm sure you've been watching some of the round 2 playoffs, but I mean, how amazing is it to watch Andre Palat, Yanni Gord, Verhaeghe, Shen? You still got guys that are from our lineage that are crushing it right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to see.
And I root for those guys, just not against us, obviously. But I root for their personal success. A lot of those guys, you mentioned, Palat, Verhaeghe, Gord, they went through our development program. Like when I was the GM of the Crunch, when I oversaw player development, and so I saw them come in. I was there when we drafted Andre Palat. And the story behind that, I signed Yanni Gord. He was on a AHL PTO. I signed him away literally in the middle of the night, like at 12:01, to bring him into our organization. So we have a history. Carter Verhaeghe was a trade that we had done where we needed to move Christos Gudlevskis for all sorts of reasons. And I got Carter Verhaeghe on the way back for moving Christos Gudlevskis. And he ended up being a phenomenal player. And I would think the common theme for those three players were no one expected them to end up being this good.
Right.
I would say most people didn't expect any of them to play in the NHL. And not only are they in the NHL, like Carter Verhaeghe just scored 40 goals.
Yeah. Well, I'd throw Jonathan Marchessault in there as well.
Yeah,
Right,
March was another one, yeah.
Another guy.
Yeah,
You never know. And now we see Darren. So Darren Radish is playing over 20 minutes a night for us in the Stanley Cup finals as a 27-year-old. He came to our organization a few years back and has transformed himself to, like, from where he was. He bought into our program. He bought into what Ben Groot was preaching. When I see him play here at the NHL level, I see Ben Groot's teachings. I see the habits that he harps on. And Darren worked on his skating. He worked on his strength, and now he's an NHL player, and he's it's just like another success story for us.
We're looking forward to seeing what he can bring to the table in the next couple of years. So I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Sometimes when you're sitting in bed at night, do you ever think about a hypothetical world where there's no salary cap and what this team might look like?
Wow. I've never played that game. I have played the game of, had we not had the pandemic, where would the cap be and how many of those guys would I have been able to keep? I've played that game, but there's really no point. Right? At the end of the day, like.
So let me put it to you another way. If you were in charge of the NHL, the NHLPA, what would you change about the current CBA? Is there anything in the CBA right now that you think should be amended or could be changed?
There's 32 GMs. There are 32 ownerships or groups. The commissioner, the deputy commissioner, everyone's got their own opinion on things. But I think generally speaking, we have the best system, and we see it in the competitive balance of our league.
Right.
Would I like for us to have all the advantages and win all the time? Yeah, I would. But if I'm looking at the bigger picture, I think we have a collective bargaining agreement that works for the players and works for the owners and works for the fans. And at the end of the day, those are the three major stakeholders and the ones that matter the most.
Right. So I found a little interesting thing, and the reason that I thought it was really cool is because my daughter plays hockey, and I found a donation you made to the University of Montreal to their women's hockey program. They're one of the only francophone hockey teams in Canada in the university program. Can you talk about that and why that was important, why you felt like you wanted to contribute in that way?
Well, I I went to 2 universities in Montreal. I got my law degree at the University of Montreal, and I got my MBA at Concordia University. And for all sorts of reasons, when I left Concordia, they hit me up for money right away.
Of course, what school doesn't, right? But.
So I kind of got into the habit of having annual donations, and then as you progress in life and you have you're able to accumulate a little bit more, and
$75,000. That's a pretty.
You're able to give a little bit more. Yeah. 1 year, I kind of got a renewal letter from the alumni coordinator at Concordia. Hey, your deal's up. We'd like you to re-up. And I called him. I said, maybe I can do something more. Mm-hmm. And it literally took months of him talking with me, like, how could we leverage your name a little bit? And we ended up setting up 2 scholarships at Concordia University for female hockey players.
Awesome.
And eventually, a few years back, Julie Chu, who is going to end up in the Hall of Fame, all-time great women hockey player for Team USA, is coaching the team there. She's the head coach there in Montreal. I had her come to one of our development camps as a guest instructor. She's phenomenal. I think so much of her and her leadership. And in talking with her and talking with the director of alumni, they thought the best way to help the university was to create these 2 scholarships for women's hockey for Concordia.
Right.
And a few years after that, University of Montreal hit me up because they were trying to, raise a certain amount of money. And I said, I will gladly help, but maybe we can make this, instead of just writing you a check, maybe we can have it directed somehow.
Right.
And I've made the money I'm going to give you, I earn in hockey. So maybe I can help your hockey program. And being in touch with the coaches there, and they have a director of hockey operations there. We ended up giving an amount of money there that kind of helps them with certain expenses. Like Concordia wanted it to be directed towards scholarships. University of Montreal wanted it to be directed towards coaching. So they know how to use the money, and I'm glad I can help.
Of hockey that's really growing.
Yeah.
You see women in management in the NHL now, and when Toronto was here, Kaylee Wickenheiser's on their staff, Cassie Campbell, amongst others. I'm not mentioning, but it's definitely an area that hockey's growing in that capacity.
Yeah, you got Braydon Coburn calling professional women's hockey games.
Yeah,
It
was fun, and the level of hockey was exciting. It was really exciting hockey.
Actually.
But Julian, one other thing, you said early on in your career you decided there was 3 keys to your happiness. It was work you enjoy, fitness, and your family, and everything else you could do without. Is that still true, or have things changed?
No, I was very fortunate. I found that out young enough, and that's guided most of my life decisions since, and how I allocate my time. Most of my time is taken up by my work, my family, and my weekend warrior, pickleball, workout, tennis, whatever it may be. And that's what brings me the most happiness. And then when I have time for something else, then something else comes in. But there's only 24 hours in a day. You need some sleep. So a lot of my life is actually those 3 things.
Sure. Listen, I know, again, you're a very busy man, and we both thank you very much for taking some time and some insight on things from this past season and what we can look forward to for the next decade of Tampa Bay Lightning hockey. And it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you today. And go Bolts, as we all say. And we'll see you very soon, because the season will be here before we know it, Bolts fans. Thank you. Julien BriseBois on the Bolts Block Party.